Perfect.
We all know what James Bond's favourite drink is, right? 007 is iconic around the world, and if you were to ask anyone, they would probably all give you the same answer.
Vodka Martini, shaken, not stirred.
They would be wrong. I'm the captain. I like to tell stories from the history of drinking, but I'm also a Bond fan. So in this video, I'm going to run through James Bond's favourite drinks.
It has not been perfected out of years of patient research.
I've compiled every drink consumed by James Bond in the Ian Fleming books and in the Eon films. So I've not included the 1967 adaptation of Casino Royale or the Wig-tastic Never Say Never Again. I've also removed any drinks that are duplicated in the books and the films. I've occasionally had to make an educated guess based on glassware, cultural deductions, but mostly this is based on him ordering, referring to, or just wanging on about his drink to whoever he's trying to bang at the time. So sit back and stroke your cat in a malevolent fashion while we rank Bond's booze. Okay, sharing 27th place are a bunch of drinks that Bond only drinks once, and where better to start than the first drink from the first book, Casino Royale, which is a pink gin. Now, pink gin is just gin and Angostura bitters, and it's how naval officers would take Angostura bitters to combat seasickness. Not to be confused with the modern use of pink gin, which is just a strawberry or raspberry flavoured gin. Now, a large part of the appeal of the Bond books and films has always been the glamorous locations, especially before the 1980s. So Fleming's books were written during a period of post-war austerity, and international travel just simply wasn't an option for most readers. And airlines catered very much for a luxury crowd. You'd spend several months' salary if you wanted to buy an air ticket, and planes were small. In fact, this didn't really change until the 1970s with the launch of the 747 at the start of the decade, and at the end of the decade there was sort of deregulation and a price war between airlines, and air travel suddenly got cheaper. But I digress. My point being is that before the 1980s, Bond films would often be the only way people got to see moving, full-colour images of some of these places. And as part of that aspirational appeal, when he's in these locations, Bond likes to sample the local wares, be they the women or indeed the drinks. And we'll see this popping up throughout the list. So on that note, we have a Negroni, which he drinks in Rome in the short story Risico. When he's with Goldfinger in the film version, in Kentucky he has a mint julep, which is a drink that's associated with the Kentucky Derby. And just as he has a julep to keep cool in the heat of Kentucky, he also has a glue wine, which is like a German mulled wine to warm him up when he's in a ski resort in For Your Eyes Only. Now, technically he doesn't actually get to drink that, as he gets nabbed by BB, who's this sort of teenage character who's got a crush on Bond. It's pretty icky. It's a crush that actually in the script he gives into, but to Roger Moore's credit, he was so revolted by the idea that Bond was that much of a predator, he insisted it be rewritten. So while there are some pretty icky age gaps in the latter Roger Moore films, that one we were spared from. Also, with one drink each, we have him drinking a mojito in Havana, in Pierce Brosnan's One Film Too Many, Die Another Day. He has a sherry in the book of Her Majesty's Secret Service, and he also drinks a black velvet, which is a drink which you don't really see anymore. It's equal parts champagne and Guinness, and originally it was invented to mourn the death of Prince Albert. The idea being is that the Guinness sort of separates from the champagne, it looks like a black armband. And finally, he has a creme de menthe in the book of Thunderball. Speaking of creme de menthe, in 19th place, we have a drink that he has 3 times in the books, and it's something that's kind of fallen out of fashion now, and that's a stinger. So stingers are brandy and creme de menthe. They were once a drink of high society, and although it pops up a lot in films and literature from the sort of 1940s and 50s, you'll rarely see them today outside of maybe the odd classic cocktail bar. In fact, minty cocktails pretty much died in the 70s. In 18th place, we have rye whiskey. Now, this appears a few times in the books, but never in the films. The closest he gets to drinking rye whiskey in the films is in Live and Let Die, when him and Felix were in New Orleans, and Felix orders Sazeracs, which are like a local variation on the old-fashioned that's got rye whiskey in it. But before he gets to drink it, he disappears down a trapdoor. Tied with rye, we have that most British of drinks, the gin and tonic, which the literary Bond drinks with the juice of a whole lime. In 16th place, we have an Americano, which is an Italian aperitif. It's the ancestor of the Negroni. It's got no gin in it, and he drinks that about 5 times. And tied with that, we have 3 separate anise-based spirits, which I've just lumped together: Greek ouzo, Turkish raka, and Lebanese arak, and they're all drunk in their respective countries. Next up, we have various different kinds of schnapps, which he knocks back a few times. I appreciate schnapps is a family of different drinks, but it's my list and I'm not German, so I don't care. Okay, so it's time for something more iconic now. At 13, we have a drink with arguably the most important emotional connection to Bond, and that's the Vodka Martini. Invented by Fleming and still appearing in his old drinking den Duke's Bar in Mayfair. This absolute powerhouse of a drink only appears in Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. In fact, he gets completely drunk on them in the latter. Incidentally, in the film of Casino Royale, Bond dictates Fleming's exact recipe.
3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quinoa lily, shake it over ice, and then add a thin slice of lemon peel.
In reality, that would have been impossible for the barman to make because one of the main ingredients, quinoa lily, has not existed since 1986. And there's also a nice Easter egg in No Time to Die when he breaks into his old MI6 bunker to get his Aston Martin, and we see a dusty bottle of Lillet Blanc, which is like the modern sweeter variation, and that's sat on his desk. At number 12, we have white wine. He drinks about 11 glasses across the canon. In the Book of Live and Let Die, he orders a bottle of Liefraumilch with Felix. Now, that's not a very fashionable wine these days, and its story is quite curious. Originally, it was produced initially only using grapes from a very prestigious church vineyard in the 1700s, and it was very much a luxury, sophisticated wine through the 1800s, but the idea that it had to be grown near the church wasn't bound into law, and so various other winemakers were able to start producing it. And the most famous of those, of course, being Blue Nun. And Blue Nun were very clever at marketing. So at that time, the social norm was to have different wines with each course. But that was fine for high society, but for the working class people who were just starting to eat in restaurants at that time, the rules of etiquette around that sort of stuff were quite intimidating. Nobody wanted to be seen drinking the wrong kind of wine with their food. So Blue Nun marketed itself as a wine you could drink through the whole meal. And by the late 1970s, it was the best-selling wine in the world. But times move on and fashions change, and it ended up being the cheap wine that someone brings to your party. So whereas once upon a time it was this lovely wine that Bond would drink, now it's probably more known for being the favourite wine of Alan Partridge. At number 11, we have brandy. Cognac, Calvados, Armagnac. Bond has enjoyed them all. So Fleming was a bit of a brandy snob, so you often find Bond uses his knowledge of brandy to sniff out people pretending to be higher class than they are. Joint 10th, we have sake, which he drinks while being in a morally dubious Japanese disguise in You Only Live Twice. In fact, he drinks enough of it in just that one story to make it the 10th most drunk drink. It's worth adding he spends much of that book just on a massive bender because he's mourning his wife who died in the previous book. Equal with sake, we have red wine. Bond's favourite red wine is Chateau Mouton Rothschild, and we see him use his extensive knowledge of red wine in a couple of the films in order to detect villains, most famously in the final scene of Diamonds Are Forever. In 8th place, we have beer. Now, when Daniel Craig drank Heineken in Skyfall, Bond purists were up in arms. Bond would never drink a basic lager, but actually, in the books, he was pretty fond of drinking local beers, and so when he's in Jamaica, he has Red Stripe. When he's in Germany, he has Lowenbrau, and even in the States, he has Miller. Equal with beer, we have rum, sometimes neat, sometimes with soda or punch, and this is testament to how often he's in the West Indies. In sixth place, we have the greatest drink ever invented. Memorably described by the journalist H.L. Mencken as the only American invention as perfect as the sonnet, the martini, or a gin martini if you need it spelled out to you. And he drinks gin martinis and vodka martinis in the books, but film Bond just ditches gin martinis entirely. In fifth place, we have vodka. Now, vodka was virtually unheard of in the West at the start of the 20th century, but during the Cold War, it was given a certain cachet, and its rise directly correlates with the fading popularity of gin. Modern, neutral, cool, what was once white firewater was by the 50s the sort of signature drink of the modern international gentleman, and it appears through his books and his films. And now we finally get to vodka martinis. Now, if we were to just go by the films, then vodka martinis would actually be his second favourite drink, but there's two drinks in particular he drinks in massive quantities in the books, so this gets knocked into fourth place. There's a pervasive myth in drink history, which I'm guilty of repeating myself, and it's that the main reason Bond drinks vodka martinis is because Smirnoff lobbied United Artists when Dr. No was being made. And while it's true that Smirnoff did pay for product placement, the fact is, in the books, he loves them too. Ultimately, film Bond just drinks less than book Bond. Now, there are psychological reasons for this, which I'll go into shortly. But also, if the films portrayed Bond drinking as much as he does in the books, then they would be a pretty bleak watch. So how does he drink them? Well, according to the Book of Live and Let Die, his ratios are 6 parts vodka to 1 part vermouth. They're a bit watered down because, of course, he has them shaken and not stirred. But Ian Fleming wasn't trying to make the point of him watering them down by doing it that way. It's all to do with etiquette. So it was and still is really just not the done thing to shake a martini. You always stir them. So by Bond ignoring these rules of high society, we're being told that he doesn't care about stuffy pretensions. He wants it served his way, regardless of etiquette. Now, this element of Bond, I guess, has kind of been lost since we're a long way from the 1950s. With his Savile Row suits and private school education, Bond just seems like the establishment to us. But in the 1950s, he wasn't establishment. He represented this new age of post-war meritocracy, as opposed to the days of empire, lords who went to Eton, drinking port in old money London clubs. Bond detests those people. He's a civil servant on a salary, living in a flat in London. And this nuance is largely lost on modern audiences, although I'd say Daniel Craig manages to embody some of this quite well. Bond's third most consumed drink is the one that might surprise people. It's a drink he has a lot of while in America, but it's also one of his go-to drinks to have on his own, hotel rooms, bars, and as such, there's a case to be made for it maybe being his actual favourite drink, and that's bourbon. He only drinks about 5 of them in the films, but in the books he has 34 of them. And bourbon also points to a fundamental difference between book Bond and film Bond. See, on screen, drinking is a social event and a reward. And the odd film aside, Bond is a pretty one-dimensional character. In the books, though, he's never far from having a breakdown. He drinks to numb pain. In the films, he's drinking publicly in glamorous locations, casinos, high-end hotels. And in the book, yes, he's drinking there too, but he's also drinking alone a lot. He suffers from insomnia. He's often recovering from physical pain. And he's got PTSD. He's haunted by the killing he's done. You have to remember that Fleming was writing for an audience of people who'd fought in the Second World War. They knew that state-sanctioned murder comes at a psychological price. They understood why Bond would need a sedative. Modern audiences just see a cool-tempered guy who takes killing in his stride, like we do in a video game, which is as close as any of us get to that scenario. With 50 glasses consumed, Bond's second favourite drink is whiskey. It's his hard day at the office drink, as it would have been for many at the time. And although we see him drink a 50-year-old single malt in Skyfall, Bond of the books prefers blended whiskey, no ice, served with soda water. But drinking it like that has kind of become a relic of its time, really. And finally, the undisputed #1 spot with, by my calculation, over 100 glasses, Bond's and indeed Ian Fleming's favourite drink is champagne. It's the most consumed drink in the films, in the books. In the books, he drinks Fleming's favourite, Taittinger and Dom Perignon. And in the films, it's mainly Dom and Bollinger. And mostly he uses it to seduce and celebrate. The most memorable use of champagne in the books is in Moonraker. He's playing a high-stakes bridge game and needs to remain alert, so he adds amphetamines to his Dom Perignon for a speed champagne cocktail, which he weirdly stirs with some crust from a slice of toast he picks up from a plate nearby. Something I just can't really picture Roger Moore doing. So, what have we learned? Well, the Bond is more of a bourbon, scotch and champagne drinker than a martini drinker. That he's a man from an age when everyone was a functioning alcoholic. And he was a mix of extremely discerning and, with the toast example, not in any way discerning. Anyway, that's my countdown. Follow me for more drinking history. Cheers.
As you said, such good sport.